In Normandy, a German anti-tank crew waited for an American Sherman to make the same mistake every Sherman had been making for weeks. They waited for it to climb. That was the rule of the hedgerows. A tank reached the earthen bank. It rose nose first into the air. Its gun pointed uselessly at the sky. Its thin belly armor showed for just a few seconds, and in those few seconds the Germans fired. But this Sherman did not climb. It lowered its nose toward the hedge. The engine growled, the bank shook, and then, instead of a tank appearing over the top, the hedge opened. The tank came through the dirt, not over it, through it. That one difference helped break the German defense in Normandy. And it began with a sergeant, a welding torch, and a pile of German steel left behind on the beach. By July 1944, the American army in Normandy had discovered that winning a landing was not the same thing as winning a country. The beaches were behind them. The English Channel was behind them. The German front was in front of them. But between the Americans and the open roads of France stood something no planner in Washington had treated as a major weapon: farm fences. Not wooden rails, not barbed wire, not concrete bunkers, living walls. The Norman Bocage was a countryside of tiny fields boxed in by thick hedgerows, ancient earth banks packed with roots, stones, bramble, hawthorn, and old farm boundaries that had hardened over centuries. Some banks rose 4 or 5 feet. Many were crowned with vegetation taller than a man. From above, the land looked like a green quilt. From the ground, it was a maze. A platoon could stand in one field and have no idea what waited in the next. A tank commander could look through his periscope and see only leaves. An artillery observer could hear a German machine gun firing close by and still not see where the gun was hidden. American officers had trained for fast movement. They had trained for infantry, armor, artillery, and aircraft working together across open terrain. They had trained for the war they expected to fight after Normandy, but the Bocage was not that war. It took the battlefield and folded it into compartments. One field, one bank, one blind corner, one killing ground after another. And the German defenders understood it. They cut firing slits into the hedgerows. They placed machine guns to rake gaps between fields. They hid anti-tank guns where a Sherman would expose itself while trying to cross a bank. They registered mortars on lanes, openings, crossroads, and farm tracks before the Americans ever arrived. They did not need to stop the entire U.S. Army at once. They only needed to stop at one field at a time, and for weeks that was enough. The American advantages were real. They had more artillery, more vehicles, more fuel, more aircraft, more replacement equipment, more industrial power behind them than any army Germany had ever faced in the West. But none of that mattered if a tank could not see. None of it mattered if infantry crossed 10 yards of open field and vanished under machine gun fire. None of it mattered if the artillery map showed a line, and the real battlefield was a box of green walls. The Bocage did not defeat American power. It made American power arrive in pieces. A Sherman tank alone was blind. An infantry squad alone was exposed. Artillery alone was guessing. Air power alone saw tree canopies. Every arm of the army still existed, but the hedgerows kept separating them before they could become one force. That was why the cost climbed so quickly. In the first weeks after the landings, American units pushed forward by yards, then by fields, then by another farm lane that had to be taken the hard way. A day's attack might end with less than a mile gained. A battalion might fight all afternoon for ground a farmer could walk across in minutes, and every new field looked like the last one. Green walls, hidden muzzles, a road that bent too sharply, a gap that looked inviting because the Germans had made it inviting. By mid-July, the Americans had suffered tens of thousands of casualties in the Normandy campaign, and the Bocage had become more than terrain. It had become a clock. Every day spent grinding through hedgerows gave the Germans more time to hold, withdraw, rebuild, and prepare the next line. Every day lost in the Bocage delayed the breakout into France. Every day the breakout failed, the victory won on the beaches became more expensive. The generals could order attacks. They could move divisions. They could call for more artillery. But there was one problem no map table could solve. How does a 30-ton tank cross a 5-foot wall of roots and earth without turning itself into a target? At first, there were only bad answers. If the Sherman tried to smash straight through, the bank often stopped it. If it tried to climb over, the front rose, the gun lost its depression, and the floor armor showed. For a German gun crew, it was almost a training drill. Wait until the tank climbs. Wait until the belly shows. Fire before it drops. American crews began to dread the moment before crossing. The engine would strain. The tank would tilt. Inside, the crew could feel the machine exposing them. Outside, the infantry could not always protect them because the infantry could not see through the hedge either. And on the other side, a German gunner might already be looking at the one place the Sherman had to appear. That was the trap. The Bocage forced American tanks to become predictable, and predictability kills. The solution did not begin in the headquarters. It did not come from a new tank model. It did not arrive in crates from the United States. It came from Sergeant Curtis Culin of the 102nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron, attached to the 2nd Armored Division. Culin was not trying to design a famous weapon. He was trying to solve the problem directly in front of him. A hedgerow stopped a Sherman because the tank had to climb. So he asked a simpler question. What if the tank did not climb? What if it cut? Scattered behind the Normandy beaches were pieces of German obstacles that had been dragged from the surf and pushed aside after D-Day. Steel rails, heavy beams, beach defenses built to tear up Allied landing craft. To most people it was scrap. To Culin it was teeth. He and other soldiers shaped that steel into prongs and mounted them on the front of a Sherman. Not as decoration, not as armor, as a tool. The idea was brutally simple. Drive the tank into the hedgerow at ground level. Let the steel teeth bite into the bank. Let the weight of the Sherman rip open the roots and packed earth. Make a hole before the tank ever has to lift its belly into the air. The device looked crude because it was crude. Field steel, field welds, a battlefield answer to a battlefield problem. But the first time it worked, the logic was obvious. A Sherman fitted with the prongs could punch through a hedgerow in seconds. It stayed low, it kept its gun usable. It denied the German anti-tank crew the easy shot they had been waiting for. The Americans called the modified tanks Rhinos. And once senior commanders saw what the Rhinos could do, the idea moved with a speed no normal procurement system could have matched. There was no time for months of design review. No time for factory tooling. No time to ask if the paperwork looked right. Workshops in Normandy began cutting captured German obstacle steel into hedge-cutting devices. Welders worked near the front. Crews drove tanks in. Mechanics fitted the prongs. The tanks drove back out. Within roughly 2 weeks, hundreds of Shermans in the 1st Army's assault sector had been modified. By the time Operation Cobra opened on July 25, about 500 American tanks had Rhino devices or similar hedge-cutting fittings. But the steel teeth were only the most visible part of the change. Underneath that metal was something larger. The American Army was rewriting its own behavior while it fought. Tankers learned that they could not enter the Bocage alone. Infantry learned that they could not survive the open field alone. So the distance between them closed. Foot soldiers moved beside and behind the tanks, close enough to use the armor as moving cover, close enough to point out threats hidden in the hedge, close enough to kill German infantry before they could get near the Sherman with a Panzerfaust. Tank commanders learned to wait for the infantry's eyes. Infantry officers learned to time their rushes to the tank's movement. Mortar crews learned that their high-arcing fire mattered more in the Bocage than direct fire that could not see through the banks. Forward observers learned to call fire on flashes, sounds, suspected gaps, and field edges instead of neat targets on a map. Every rule had to bend around the same physical truth. The battlefield was too small for textbook war, so the soldiers made a smaller, sharper war. One hedge, one tank, one squad, one mortar section. One gap ripped open at ground level, then the next, and the next. This kind of adaptation is easy to admire after it succeeds. It was not clean while it was happening. It was paid for by crews who learned too late, by infantrymen who discovered one more machine gun after crossing one more field, by platoon leaders who wrote new tactics because the old ones had just gotten men killed. The Bocage taught quickly because it punished slowly learned lessons, and the Germans saw the change. At first, their defenses had been built around American habits. Tanks would climb, infantry would cross, artillery would strike roads. Assaults would come through obvious gates and lanes. German units prepared for that pattern, and for a time the pattern held. Then the pattern changed. Tanks began to appear where no tank should appear. Hedges that had been reliable barriers suddenly split at their base. American infantry stayed closer to armor. Mortars fell in different rhythms. Artillery found smaller targets. The German defense could still adapt. German officers were not fools. Anti-tank guns could be moved. Fields could be resitted. New gaps could be covered. But there was a timing problem. They were reacting to the last American solution while the Americans were already spreading the next one. That was the deeper danger. Not merely a steel blade on a tank. A learning cycle. A sergeant sees the problem. A crew tests an answer. A commander watches it work. A workshop builds it. A division uses it. Another unit copies it. In an army built only around rank, that process slows down while permission climbs the ladder. In Normandy it moved downward, sideways, and forward at once, and in the Bocage, speed of learning mattered as much as speed of movement. Operation Cobra began with overwhelming violence from the air. On July 25, 1944, American forces opened the breakout attack west of Saint-Lô after a massive bombardment that tore through part of the German line. Aircraft and artillery could create the opening, but they could not exploit it. Only ground forces could do that, and that was where the month of adaptation mattered. Before the Rhinos and the new small unit tactics, a gap in the German line could still close before American armor got through the surrounding hedgerows. After the adaptation, the Americans could move through the country that had trapped them. Tanks cut their own entrances, infantry kept contact, mortars covered the next field, observers adjusted faster. Commanders pushed units through the breach before German defenders could rebuild the same kind of box around them. The effect was not gradual. It was a rupture. Ground that had taken weeks to cross was suddenly crossed in days. American armor poured out of the Bocage and into the open country beyond. In the week after Cobra, U.S. forces advanced dozens of miles. The Normandy stalemate broke. The German line in western France began to come apart, and the road to Paris opened. The Rhino did not win Cobra by itself. No single welded rack of steel won a campaign. The breakout depended on air power, artillery, logistics, leadership, exhausted German formations, and the accumulated pressure of Allied armies. But the Rhino showed why the breakout became possible when it did. It was the physical symbol of an army that had stopped trying to make the terrain fit the manual and had started making the manual fit the terrain. That was the real weapon. Not just steel, not just tanks, not just industrial power, adaptation under fire. The Germans had excellent officers. They had hardened soldiers. They had built a defensive system that made brilliant use of ground nobody had designed for war. For weeks that system worked. It turned farm country into a fortress. It took the American way of fighting and broke it into disconnected pieces. But it depended on one assumption. The Americans would keep attacking the same way. They did not. A sergeant in Normandy looked at discarded enemy steel and saw a tool. Field welders turned it into teeth. Tank crews drove those teeth into the ancient banks of the Bocage, and the army around them learned fast enough to make the invention matter. Curtis Culin did not become one of the famous names of the war. He was not the general whose photograph filled newspapers. He was not the commander whose decisions were studied first. He was a sergeant who solved the exact problem that stood between his army and movement. That is why his invention mattered, because wars are not only changed by grand strategy. Sometimes they are changed by the person close enough to hear the engine strain, close enough to see where the armor is exposed, close enough to understand that the answer is sitting in a scrap pile, waiting for someone to recognize it. The Bocage had stood for centuries. In June and July of 1944 it became a German weapon. Then a handful of American soldiers bolted German steel to the front of a Sherman and changed the shape of the fight. The hedge had been a wall. The Rhino made it a door.